Hi, loves. So today I wanted to spend a little time together around sacred need and how sacred need emerges, shows up specifically in intimate relationships. And in that, visit some of what are sacred needs, also some of the ways in which you can tend to your own sacred needs, determine what they are, kind of refine what they are out of what might be other kind of more desperate or grasping needs. So, how you can simplify and know yourself and know your sacred needs. And then also, how can you hold yourself and hold those needs in a way that actually opens the possibility that they be met? That in your intimate relationships, in your life, that you're carrying your sacred needs in a way that keeps the doorway open and keeps the yearning in a place where fulfillment of that yearning is a possibility, and where you're not pushing things away or getting in your own way or making choices that um, don't don't support your own the right relationship to yourself and your own right relationship to need. So, the first thing to do is to stop pathologizing your needs. So, having needs, this sounds really simple, but you will notice, as I have noticed, and many other women especially have noticed, that we pathologize all our own needs. We pathologize them by making them wrong, by assuming that they're too much, by categorizing ourselves as needy, by moving into a lot of classifications of ourselves as codependent or wounded or demanding or all these things. Where we're going to with sacred need is a different movement. It's not to pathologize or to overanalyze need, but to understand the sacred need that's underneath of whatever may presenting. So yeah, sometimes we are demanding and sometimes we are needy and kind of grasping and desperate, and sometimes we're entitled and we're bitter and we're demanding, right? Those are kind of distortions or twists on sacred need. So if you can start to identify and understand the reality that, especially when you enter into intimate relationship and especially when you start to move sexually or intimately with another person, that what you're tapping into is a kind of dance that has a sacred need in it and a type of call and response that's just part of the dance. If you can start to know that inside of yourself and honor that that is what's happening, you'll start to be able to kind of stop overriding your needs, stop pathologizing them, and start refining them. Start understanding what's at the heart of them, and start understanding that there are personality needs and there are things that kind of flare up and demand this or that for different reasons based on just our personality or what we're going through. But underneath that are more kind of natural law type sacred needs that are not going to go away. They are part of the dance and they are part of what creation yearns for in terms of how love opens and meets and amplifies and generates and deepens and softens into more love. So that's our first thing, is to stop pathologizing and to start looking towards refining your need, holding it, and understanding it as an opportunity for a very beautiful dance. In that, you may not be pathologizing your needs, but you are taking responsibility for them. So one of the kind of pieces of sovereignty that really has to move into a true relationship with sacred need, especially if you want to, which you need to, bring it to your intimate relationships in a good way, if you want them to thrive and take you somewhere amazing, is to take responsibility for them, to you become the guardian of your own, you become the guardian of everything for you first, and be willing to take responsibility for your needs in terms of owning them, honoring them, noticing when they are or are not being met. If they're not being met, sorting out a way for them to get met rather than overriding or going into depletion and compromise. So what that means is, briefly, in intimate relationships, you may or may not have your sacred needs met at different moments. It's not about pushing all of that onto your intimate relationships. It's going to be a dance. It's about kind of bringing it to your relationship in the right way, noticing when it's not being met, and then knowing how to self-source, knowing how to spread your roots and your branches in other directions so that you are never, no matter what is going on with circumstance, no matter what is going on with your intimate partners, that you are never left in a place where your true needs can't be met simply because you won't look anywhere else than this one intimate partner who would make the most sense to meet them but may not be, right? So understanding the nature of sacred needs, not confusing them with codependency, refining them, owning them. And I would name a few sacred needs for you, ones that I've identified in myself and with a lot of other women. And by the way, this is not at all just about women. I think that this is about intimacy and truly holding each other in intimate relationship. One of the needs is to be seen. And so, it's not just about attention grabbing, and it's not about like a need to be seen all the time. The sacred need to be seen is literally the reality that when someone, especially someone intimate to you, really sees you, they call your soul to the surface. They call your essence and your being more close to the surface of you. They bring you forward. And that is part of the covenant between true lovers, between true partners and true beloveds in life, is to see each other. So if you're not being seen, if there's always like a veil or a lot of projection in between you and your partner, and there are never moments of really coming in and seeing each other, there's a sacred need that's not being met. To be seen. Another one is to be met. And to be met, it means a lot of different things for different ones of us. I mean, I hear a lot of women especially saying, I'm just never met in relationship or whatever. And I know that there are many men that experience the same. To be met isn't a demand, and part of how you know you're on sacred need or not, or you're really in responsibility with it, has to do with how you hold it. If you're feeling demanding and entitled and kind of pissed and depleted, you're not yet in responsibility for your sacred need. You are not, in your essence, you are not a demanding, bitter, entitled kind of being, right? In your essence, you are a being who thrives on love and who yearns for a certain kind of union, right? So to be met is literally like if you think about the sun on the petals of a rose, or the way that the ocean comes up and meets the shore. Like, to be met is a feeling. It's a feeling of someone meeting you. There's somebody right here and meeting you and meeting octaves of your being. That doesn't mean that anybody that you're with has to meet you in every possible way, but it does mean that there are really fundamental octaves of your being, fundamental ways in which you operate and know life that need to be met. Otherwise, the two of you are going to create disharmony rather than harmony, and you're not going to walk the same path together. So that need to be met is a sacred need. It's not the same thing as like, I really want us to like the same music and drink the same beer, like have the same kind of hobbies. This is something different. I need to be met in my being. I need to feel met. I need to feel like we're meeting each other and taking each other further, right? Another sacred need is to be held so that you can surrender. So being held not just physically, emotionally, being held in your heart, being held in your body, being held sometimes even financially. It's, being held in the home, however it is that holding happens for you, that is a sacred need. To feel alone or isolated or kind of dropped or kind of floating aimlessly without a place to rest is a compromise of a sacred need that you will have in order to reach certain places in your being. So you may find that there are intimate relationships that have an amazing period of time, and they're a little more they're dynamic in a certain way. They might be unstable in a certain way, and they have their role. But what you will eventually discover most likely is that if you want to deepen into your own surrender, your surrender into yourself, your surrender into all the ways that you really need to grow, and all of the ways that you want and could dissolve into the greater powers that are you, the greater essence that is you, holding is important, because you will not surrender unless there's something to surrender into. So if a relationship is calling you into trust, is calling you into a certain level of surrender, know that feeling held is a sacred need for that. It's a non-negotiable. You are not going to surrender, and you'll make yourself crazy trying to surrender and trying to relax and trust if you're not held, because your being and your body knows better and will not betray you by softening and fully giving way to something or someone or a situation that is not yet worthy of that and is not yet holding you in a way that will allow that and truly invite that. Right? Another sacred need is to be sheltered and protected. There's a way that, power and vulnerability are going to come up when you are starting to engage intimately with someone. And there'll be two kind of very parallel and woven needs. One is the need to shine, the need to be fully in your power and in power with this other person, the power of passion, the power of expression, the power of your essence and your expression. The other part that will come with that, always with power, is vulnerability. And that vulnerability has a sacred need to be sheltered and protected. It's not enough to just be in your power together, or to, figure things out together, or to shine together and expect that, to fall in love and to have all this. Expect the reality that true power comes along with vulnerability, and vice versa. So the need to feel sheltered and protected at times, or on a fundamental level, is also a sacred need. That is not just some unresolved inner child need. That's not some, need you can psychologize because of, some experience in your past. It's part also of this dance of surrender and union. The final one I'll say, which kind of encapsulates all of these, is just to be cherished. The way that you would, the way that someone would touch like the finest gold, or the softest silk, that the adoration, to be adored and to be cherished, is part of what will bring deep feminine essence to the surface. It's also part of what opens the heart, both male and female. I mean, this isn't necessarily at all a gendered thing. Deep feminine presence, deep feminine essence lives inside of all of us, and it responds. She responds to cherishing, to adoration. She rises up to that, and she's fed by that. It is a sacred need. You think of your intimacies as gardens of delight. They need to be fed, and they need to be watered with the good. And one of the biggest goods, the best fertilizer you can put on there, is cherishing. So sacred needs: to be seen, to be met, to be held so that you can surrender, to be sheltered and protected, and to be cherished. And these needs will shift and refine as you go, through other works, but they do need to be acknowledged. And if you can hold them in a good way, like really hold them as sacred needs, you're going to be better informed about how to bring them to your relationships, right? So from there, I would just like to spend a few minutes kind of touching on, what do you do though? Because, okay, great, you know what the sacred needs are, and if you can stop pathologizing them, then you're most likely to have them met in many different ways. But what happens when you're in a relationship, or you were in a relationship, that either is not or never did meet your sacred needs, or kind of met your sacred needs, opened you, and then bailed for whatever reason, or fell apart for whatever reason, so that you may have had one of two different experiences. One is of just being in a relationship in an intimacy where none of your sacred needs get met and you're left depleted and confused and feeling wrong, feeling like there's something wrong with you, or this other experience that is actually in its own way equally as devastating, which is to touch that with someone and then to, for whatever reason, have it fall away, like to be held and then not held, to touch incredible cherishing and beauty and then all of a sudden be vilified. There's these other, there's that journey can be a very difficult, very painful one, because, well, for obvious reasons, partly because once some of these sacred needs are met, what happens is your being will start to blossom, and although it's powerful and amazing, there is this tenderness there. And when or if it falls away, there's a way that we really need to hold ourselves and tend to ourselves. So I'm going to give you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think 6 different thoughts on how to approach that, how to approach the not meeting or the dropping away of the meeting of your sacred needs in a way that will help you to honor yourself, regardless of circumstance and regardless of what any intimate ever chooses to do. I mean, the first is, again, don't pathologize. If you notice that you're yearning or you're preoccupied, don't make that wrong. That's actually really normal, especially if you've engaged sexually and intimately with someone. There is an opening, there is a bonding, there's a lot that has just happened. So even though on the external, maybe the relationship falls apart or whatever happens, it's not abnormal or weird or wrong to yearn for them, to be preoccupied, because what's happening is your whole being is reorienting. You had an intimacy. There's a lot of levels on which you are reorienting. Now, how you can help yourself go through that process is with some of these other things. But first, don't pathologize it. Just hold yourself. Of course you're yearning. Of course you're preoccupied. You were probably really impacted by the intimacy. And therefore, there are all these ripples in your being. Of course, right? How to tend to that, because what you don't want to do is keep looking out to that person. If they are not able to or desiring to meet your sacred needs, you need to pull back. Don't bring your treasure to someone who doesn't know or desire to adore it, right? So when your sacred needs aren't being met, that is not a time, even if you have yearning, even if you're preoccupied, the movement is not towards trying to fulfill the yearning with that person. The movement needs to be towards sealing up. What you want to do is understand that what has happened is you have opened and you have become more porous and more woven with this person in ways you may not even be totally conscious of. The movement that's going to support you the most is to seal up, contain yourself in terms of boundaries and how you're going to start differentiating you and them and bringing yourself back to yourself. Remember again with boundaries how important it is to hold them in a way that's about containing yourself, keeping yourself close rather than keeping them out. The more you try to keep them out, and the more it's basically the more you're going to be preoccupied. Like, you want to pull attention away from the relationship and from the energetic exchange that's there. So come into more this idea of, how can I seal myself up? How can I contain myself? How can I get more of myself inside of myself, and what do I need to do in order to do that? Like, do I need to block someone from my phone? Do I need to state some boundaries, not to push away, but to call in and to carve out some space and some ground for your own self to meet your own sacred needs? It's almost like you're basically saying, look, only whoever desires and can meet my sacred needs with me and wants to have that journey with me is welcome inside this space in which I've contained myself and which I am cherishing my essence. So whatever practices you have, whatever, I don't know. There's a ton in her mystery school. We're trying to get different practices and webinars and things out, but look towards sealing. And in that, inquire with yourself, why it is you might breach your own containment. When you notice that someone that you're having a hard time disengaging from a relationship that isn't meeting your needs and that isn't able to respect your needs, your place of power, you have no control over them. You cannot, you can invite it, you can't demand it, and you cannot make someone able, capable, or interested in holding you in that way. You can't. It's a grace and a gift, and it's something they have to develop inside of themselves. All you really have power over is, why are you potentially breaching your own containment? Why is it not enough to you to be full of your own essence? What is it that you think this other person has? Sacred need is a part of the dance, but it doesn't mean that anybody else has something that you need that you won't be able to get if they choose not to give it, if they choose not to meet you. So, or if they can't. So inquire and see, help yourself get more clear about your own illusions, your own assumptions that are making you break out of your own containment and reach in directions that aren't actually nourishing for you. You have a lot of power in that place because you can redirect that energy from the source. You can find out what that need is. Oh, I need reassurance, or I need to feel beautiful, or I need to feel met, whatever it is. If you can name that, then and own it as your need, then you can move with that in ways that are more nourishing to you rather than just projecting it and putting it on someone who unfortunately just is never going to take you there, right? Another thing to do is to name what isn't or wasn't okay. So a lot of us tend to, and it's important eventually, to go into forgiveness and into a state of openness and to claim sovereignty and responsibility for ourselves, all those things. But it's going to be hard for you to fully move away from something and to fully get and harvest the learning from it if you don't allow yourself to name what isn't or wasn't okay. Just name it. Sit and face it for a minute. And try not to go into blame. That doesn't really help. Try not to go into victim. That doesn't really help. But don't hesitate to name it. Like, that wasn't okay. That was disrespectful. That completely marginalized me. Whatever it is, don't collapse inward on yourself, assuming that it's always because you did something wrong. That is a very common thing, especially among women. So give yourself the moments to name what isn't or wasn't okay so that you know yourself, and do it from that place. I need to know myself, not what kind of an asshole was this person. Let me describe all the ways. What you need, why you are naming it is simply to state what is and what was, and to know yourself, to know that wasn't okay for you, and now you know, and now you have more power, and now you've actually gleaned something from that experience that makes it a certain form of nourishment rather than a total depletion. Okay? So don't pathologize, seal up your container, name what isn't or wasn't okay, and then also honor the beauty. When you, especially if some of your sacred needs have been touched consciously or unconsciously by another person, sometimes people just don't even realize what's moving through them, or don't even really understand fully what's happening inside of you as a result of being in contact with them. So you might have ecstatic, beautiful, deeply surrendered, deeply powerful and exquisite experiences with someone who either doesn't quite understand the full impact of what you've experienced, or just wasn't there with you. It was your experience. But what's happening there is that some of your sacred needs are getting met, and they will leave you with this incredible yearning for that person because they were the place in which you touched something so touched something that's like lifeblood for you. So one of the ways to move that so that also, again, that can be a gift rather than kind of I won't say a curse, but like a gift rather than like a burden, is to honor it by celebrating it. honor and speak or write or do something to fully accept and take in what was given to you by creation through this person and through this experience. Like, oh my God, I felt like I touched God, or my heart opened more deeply than it ever has. It's like to sing the beauty of that in some way and to honor it is a way of grieving it, is a way of saying, this was precious to me. This was a gift from beyond, and I am grateful for it. And in a way, I honor it and I give it back. I give thanks that it came to me, and I mourn it, I release it back to from where it came, knowing that it will come again. Right? So you're releasing the sacred gift and the beauty from the person, bringing it back to an answer to your own sacred need, and bringing it back to a gift that was given to you, not something that was just given and then taken away. Another thing to do for sure, which is kind of contained in all of this, is to recommit to sovereignty practices. Sovereignty meaning, how do you tend to yourself? How are you one unto yourself? And all the art forms of sovereignty and all the art forms of union in some ways are different art forms. In union, we're looking to surrender, to dissolve, to be taken, to just, to all of these. It's a particular kind of dance. Sovereignty is, in a way, the opposite. How am I going to stand tall? How am I going to hold myself rather than understand how I'm going to surrender to you or to another? So the balance between cultivating sovereignty and cultivating sacred marriage inside of your communion is an important one to hold. When you are coming out, when the union piece is not the realm that you're being invited into, that's not real for you right now, then move more deeply into sovereignty. That's where you go, because sovereignty is what allows union to happen, right? It's still always the place where you can return to and where you know that it's safe for you to explore and to adventure into the terrain of union, because no matter what happens, you can come home to yourself, right? Okay. I'm going to wrap this up. We're going on and on. I obviously could talk about this for a long time. One more thing I say is reach out often for perspective and support. It's a place where we'll get amnesia because of the yearning and because of just it can be confusing. So make sure that you know where you go to in order to just remember who you are. Don't try to do it entirely on your own. It's really difficult. And it's not the way it's meant to be done, whether it's good friends, sisters, what we're doing here, whatever it is that holds you in a place that you trust, that you can go back to repeatedly, to remember your wholeness and your beauty, to be seen, to be met, to be held, to be cherished. Know where that is in your life and go to it. It can be nature, whatever it is, but make sure to reach out. It's not something that you're supposed to be figuring out on your own. And yeah, that's next to impossible to do. These are interwoven experiences that we have and that we help each other through. So in conclusion, I'll leave you with this image. Imagine that your sacred needs imagine you're a rose, or any flower you'd like, one that blossoms and opens, and that your sacred needs are simply those needs that need to be met in order for you to open. So sacred need for sun, for clear water, for space, to be touched in a particular way, to have the sun not too far and not too close. Like that that's what your sacred needs are. They are what they will bring you to the fullness of what you were created to be, right? So in your exploration of what all it means to you, just be aware that what probably happened for you and happens for you in intimate relationships is that you open, and that what you are often left with, what we are often left with, is how do we turn our petals towards the sun, a sun that will be more stable and stably nourishing, right? Don't think about like, okay, this one source of nourishment is gone and that's all that I have. Remember that you can turn towards other sources of nourishment, and also that there are times when what's actually being asked for is that you close your petals. And that's an okay place to be. That is not the same thing as shutting down, and it's not the same thing as compressing inward and collapsing. It's about saying, there's no sunshine here. I'm gonna just close my petals, condense my fragrance, condense myself, go into this place where I am cultivating and saturating and preparing to open again with more than what I've ever opened with before. Hold yourself in that way. When you have to pull in from a union, when you have to pull in from an intimacy, see if you can find the way that you do this, the way that you come back to bud and really potentize and condense fragrance for yourself inside of yourself until it's time again to bloom, because what's around you again invites that. There's a power and a beauty and actually a deliciousness in closing your petals that is and can be as delicious as being completely opened and in blossom. So, sacred need, we all have them, and they are what will, dancing with sacred needs is what will allow your intimacies to have true beauty to them, and true love and true authenticity, and more of you. I love you. Blessed be.